These coasters are quite possibly the easiest things you will ever make. Now scratch that. They are definitely the easiest things you'll ever make. This particular pattern comes available in both sizes for the 5x7 inch hoop and the 4-inch hoop. And I'm going to show you how to make these coasters by making this little Christmas tree coaster in the 5x7 inch hoop. So gather your supplies and let's get started. You're going to need the following supplies for one coaster. One 6x6 inch piece of fabric, that's going to be your borders and your backing. A 4.5 by 4.5 inch fabric, that's going to be for your background of your design. 6 by 8 inch fabric, you're going to need 2 of those. Those are for your backing. And you're going to need a 6 by 6 inch piece of cotton batting. You're going to need some cutaway stabilizer, some basting spray, a 4-inch piece of 1/2 inch wide fusible seam tape. Unless you plan on stitching your backing closed, you can do that as well. A 6 by 6 inch piece of tearaway stabilizer or tissue paper, size 11 embroidery needle, embroidery thread, and general sewing and embroidery supplies. I have already loaded the design into my machine and I have threaded it. I have also hooped my medium weight cutaway stabilizer. So now I'm going to put this into the machine and I'm going to stitch out that first step. That is going to be your placement stitches for the project. Before going any further, I'm going to share with you 2 things that I think make this project faster and easier. First being this thread color. As you can see, I chose the thread to match the fabric for the background of the Christmas tree. That's because the placement stitches and the basting stitches, it doesn't really matter what color of thread you use. So, since the first color that I really have to be concerned about is this background one, and I want it to match, that's the thread that I'm using for the first step, the second step, the third step, fourth step. And I will do my stippling with this color because that's the color I want my stippling to be. The next thing that I find makes it easier is this stuff. I like to use this for this particular project. Or whatever spray adhesive that you find that you like the best. It just, no pinning, no taping, it just seems to make things so much easier and faster. You can of course use pins if you prefer, but just make sure that you cut your fabric big enough so that your pins are going to be outside of the stitching area because you don't want them cut into your stitching. Okay, let's get started with our next step. So I'm going to give this a quick little shot. Yeah, I know my hoop needs washed, but just pretend you don't see that mess. So then I'm going to put that down. That is my 100% cotton batting. Okay, I'll put that. Then I'm going to give it another shot. And I'm going to place my 6 by 6 inch piece of fabric on that. Okay, see how nice it stays with the stitching spray. Okay, now I'm going to take that to my machine. I'm going to stitch my next step. That is going to be a basting stitch to go all the way around. Now if you did use pins to hold down your fabric, you can remove them now because your basting stitch is going to keep everything in place for you. Okay, my next stitch out is going to be the placement stitch for that background fabric, that light gray that I showed you earlier. So we're going to go ahead and give that a stitch. Now that my placement lines have been stitched, I'm going to place my little piece of background fabric right over them. Make sure covering all the stitches. And then I'm going to stitch it in place. I gave my background fabric a little quick shot of the basting spray too. But it's a small enough piece, you probably don't even have to do that if you don't want to. So we'll just let that stitch. Okay. This stitching right here is actually my tack down stitch. This is what is going to hold this in place while I cut all the excess fabric away. You can do that now, or you can do that after you do your stippling stitch. I'm just going to do it after I do my stippling stitch. Then I don't have to leave my machine. So I'm going to go ahead and do that stippling stitch. This is what I use the matching thread for, so that my stippling stitch will complement the background here. Okay, now that I have done my tack down stitch and my stippling stitch, I need to take my special embroidery scissors and I need to cut away everything outside of the stitching line. And if you need to, you can always go and do a little trimming, any excess off. I mean, the closer you get to this line, the nicer it's going to look, because you're not going to have any frayed edges coming through. And if you do have some now, just cut them away. Now I'm going to take this back to the machine and I'm going to stitch my next step, which is going to be the satin stitch that goes all the way around my little center. Okay, now that my satin stitching is complete, I can begin my decorative stitching before finishing the coasters. Now that the decorative stitching is complete, we're going to do that final stitching, and that's going to stitch the backing to the front. As you can see, I already have ironed and folded my two 6x8" pieces of fabric. This is what's going to create the back. So what I'm going to do is place this just slightly past the center. I'm just going to lay it just like that, and you can see this stitching line and this stitching line is completely covered. Then you're going to take the other one and you are going to place it with a slight overlap. A ½ inch, yeah, an inch, doesn't matter. Not too big, but ½ inch to an inch would do perfectly. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind, the fold is toward the center and the raw edges are on the outside. Okay, now what I like to do is take a piece of tissue paper. You can also use tearaway stabilizer, but this is a whole lot cheaper, and I place it over the back of the project and then I tape it in place. If you don't do this, what can very possibly happen is as you're stitching around here without this paper here, when your needle gets to this point here, it could just completely get caught up in that and push all this fabric back, and it's an ugly, ugly mess. Don't ask me how I know that. Okay, I did it, I confess. So I'm just going to stitch that in place. Then I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to stitch that final stitch. All my stitching is complete. So now I can remove everything from the hoop. I just tear all this tissue wrap away. All my tissue paper is torn away and I've removed the project from the hoop. Now the next thing to do is take my scissors and cut all the way around. Okay, now that I have cut that away from the stabilizer, I just now turned it right side out and push the corners out. Now all that's left to do is trim away any excess stitches, give it a nice press, and what I like to do, you can stitch this if you want, but what I like to do is take some seam tape, like it Comes in a little roll like this, and I just cut a piece down to fit in there, and then I just iron it in place, and then that seals my backing. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it inspires you to create. If you're new to In the Hoop by Sher, pop over to the website and sign up for our weekly email, where you will find a freebie almost every week. Before you leave, it would be so incredibly wonderful if you could like, subscribe, comment, or share. If you want to make your own coasters, the link is available in the description below. Thanks for watching.